Dr. E started us off last week with the story we find ourselves in. And we all kind of are part of the story called the sanctuary right now. And, as Tyler was mentioning, one of the things that I have the pleasure of overseeing is a lot of our outreach stuff. So I'm really going to kind of like explore that from, an outward standpoint. If you have a Bible in your hand or in your pocket or in your phone or in front of you, turn with me if you would. All the pages. To Matthew chapter 22. Matthew chapter 22, verse 34, and we'll read through 40. Matthew chapter 22. I'll give you guys just a minute to get there. When I was a kid, in church, we used to do these things called sword drills. And the Bible, we had to be on the table in front of you, and the Sunday school teacher would read off the verse, and we would race to see who could get there first, and then read it. And I was always last. Because I'd have to look at the front page, okay, what version, what page, and then, or I'm singing in my head, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, okay, and so I wasn't always great at that, but I eventually found it. So Matthew chapter 22, verses 34 through 40, commonly referred to as the greatest commandment. It says, hearing that Jesus had silenced the Sadducees, the Pharisees got together. One of them, an expert in the law, tested him with this question, Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law? Jesus replied, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment, and the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and prophets hang on these two commandments. God, we thank you. We thank you that we can just be together and study your word and hear your word and worship in your presence, Father God. God, I pray that you would be with us this morning, that you would just let us hear your voice. Not my voice, but hear your voice, Father. Not my heart, but hear your heart, Father. Let me reflect you this morning, Jesus. Be with us today. So who are we? Why do we do what we do? We do a handful of things, and like I mentioned, I get the pleasure of overseeing a lot of our outreach stuff. A ragamuffin, which right now, by the way, if you've smelled a lovely burger in the parking lot, it's because we're doing another barbecue grill time for our homeless friends and neighbors. And so when we're done here, feel free to go out there and get a burger. There's watermelon, I believe, might be some sweets, I'm not totally sure. But feel free to go out and get a burger when we're done here. So ragamuffin, that's a big part of what we do. Our food pantry, which, I think I described here a little bit here a few weeks ago, our food pantry below us is tens of thousands of pounds of food below us here that we give out first and third Saturday of every month. I think Linda said we fed 75 families yesterday with our pantry. She said we gave away 6,000 pounds of food. So that's a lot. I feel like that's a lot. I don't know. West School across the street, we're doing the backpack drive, trying to get pencils. We have a counseling center on the third floor. We've partnered with SRC. We have a clothing closet that has been shut down due to COVID, but Miss Alexis is getting ready to start that back up. And so we have all these things that we do. But why do we do them? Are we just a community center? Why do we do them? What sets us apart? Westside Cares is an amazing organization. They do tremendous work for the community. What sets us apart from organizations like that? What makes us different? God. Our belief in Jesus. If you look at our website, we have the Nicene Creed on there, and I'm going to give the Cliff Notes version. It's, I believe in God the Father, the one true God, the maker of heaven and earth. He has a son, Jesus Christ, who was born of a Virgin Mary, lived a sinless life, was crucified for our sins in our place, rose on the third day. The Holy Spirit came as a comforter to us. These are concrete beliefs. The gospel is what makes us different. The gospel is what sets us apart. So what is the gospel? The good news. The gospel is the good news. The gospel is the good news about Jesus. The gospel is the good news about the person and work of Jesus Christ. The gospel is the good news that there is a God who is rescuing and redeeming his children, restoring all of creation to himself. The gospel is the good news that there is a loving God rescuing and redeeming his children, restoring all of creation back to himself through the person and work of Jesus Christ. That's good news. And let me tell you, folks, we're not here to give good advice. We're here to give good news. I'm going to get a drink. Maybe. I'm going to drop it first. I don't have hair, so I'll flick that. So what does that look like? What does that mean when we love God and love others? What does that look like when we're walking in the gospel? What does that mean when we're sharing the gospel with others? Are we only preaching to people, or are we living it? Does it change our life? Does it change the way we behave? I love that. Like you're getting ahead. Stop. 2 gold stars. Okay. All right, in Matthew chapter 25, Jesus talks about, and I'm going to kind of paraphrase this a little bit, but this is when the Son of Man comes in his glory, and all the angels with him, he will sit on the glorious throne, and all nations will be gathered before him. He will separate the people one from another as a shepherd separates the sheep and goats. He will say to those on his right, "Come, you who are blessed by my Father, take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you came and saw me. You looked after me. I was in prison, and you came to visit me." And the righteous will say, "Lord, when did we see you hungry or thirsty or needing clothes or sick or in prison?" And he will say to them, "I tell you, whatever you did for the least of these, you did for me." And then he will say to those on his left, "Depart from me, for I was hungry and you gave me nothing. I was thirsty and you gave me nothing to drink. I was a stranger and you did not invite me in. I needed clothes and you gave me no clothes. I was sick and in prison. You did not look after me or visit me." And they will say, "Lord, when did we see you hungry, thirsty, in prison, sick?" And he will say, "I tell you the truth, whatever you did not do for the least of these, you did not do for me." So in doing these things for others, we are doing them for God and in the name of God. So our behavior, our motivations, our compassions are changed when we're affected by the gospel. When we live the gospel, when the gospel is part of who we are, when our faith in Jesus Christ influences our everyday life, our everyday walk, it's going to change who we are. Jesus replied, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it, love your neighbor as yourself." I kind of look at those two things like byproducts of one another. In loving God, we are compelled, we are drawn to love others, to the margins, to the least of these, to the addict, to the outcast, to the lonely, to the broken, to the left behind. And when we reach out to those in need, we are showing our love of the Father. My early years of youth ministry, my mentor and I, we used this verse a lot. We called it J&O, Jesus and Others. If you grew up in church, 90s Christian culture was a little on the cheesy side. You'd have well, if your life is in order, you have Jesus, others, and you have joy, J-O-Y. So and there'd be pictures of angels and clouds in the background. So 90s Christian culture was kind of cheesy. I'm not gonna lie. It was probably on a bracelet at some point. That's when the WWJD bracelets were popular, right? I had 4 of them in 2 colors because I couldn't have a rainbow back in those days. It's 90s Christian culture was weird, but it was still good. Good time to grow up, I guess. I don't know. Jesus is saying right here, the greatest commandments, the greatest thing you can do is to love God with all your heart, mind, and soul, and to love others as yourself, which is difficult to do, right? Human nature, what does human nature want to do? Human nature is me, mine, self, protect. If you've ever had children, ever been around children, the word mine comes up a lot. Mine. No, that's mine. And, my boys, I love them so much. There might be a toy that neither one of them have seen or played with in months, but as soon as one of them picks it up, it is the sole focus of the other one's attention. Am I right, parents? I don't know, maybe it's just my kids, I don't know, but as awesome as they are, they will decide to want the same toy, and there's 100 toys down there. I mean, there's a bunch. There's a whole bunch. I step on them all the time. So it's counterintuitive. It's countercultural to walk in the gospel, to live in the gospel, to follow this commandment to love God and to love others. But to follow Christ, to serve Christ, is to put others before yourself. You know, Jesus talks a lot about the kingdom when he's, in his teaching, he talks about a lot about the kingdom. And you hear the kingdom described as like the already and not yet, the here and now. So we're living in the kingdom now. It's not this far off place where we'll get to eventually after we die. We get to walk in the presence of God. We get to walk in what God has called us to now. And that's part of living in the kingdom. And part of that is walking in the gospel of Jesus Christ, walking in the assurance of who we are and who we serve, and also putting others before ourselves. You know, Jesus tells the story of the Good Samaritan. This is, how many of you guys know the story of the Good Samaritan? It's a pretty common story. So, Jesus is talking to like some religious leaders who were, pretty stuck-up dudes who pretty much thought that they were the best. We're definitely the best. No one is better than us. I live my life so right. I wear the right clothes. I drive the right car. Well, they don't drive cars. I have the right sandals. All that type of thing. They were perfect. And they really tried to portray this holier-than-thou attitude because, well, look how good I can follow the law. And really, and in the time, and honestly, they may have been a little bit on the racist side. And so when Jesus is telling the story of a man who's in need of help, he's been beaten up by bandits, el bandidos, if you're from South Texas like I am. He's been robbed and beat up. He's bruised. He's injured. He can't help himself. And it says... where did I see it? It says a priest came by and passed by on the other side of the road. And then a Levite came by and avoided him. Two people who would be kind of religiously proper and upstanding citizens in the society. And the third person who comes by is a Samaritan. And in these days, the Jewish folks really look down upon Samaritans. And the Samaritan man is the one who picked him up, kind of dressed his wounds, took him to a hotel, paid for several nights in advance, paid for some food and medical attention to the innkeeper, paid the innkeeper to keep after him, and said, I will return in, I don't know, like a week or something, and I will pay any outstanding bill. And so Jesus asked them who was the man's neighbor, who was the better of the group. And so this religious group is caught between saying his allegiance to, I guess, the establishment, his allegiance to the priest or the Levite, and knowing that what the Samaritan did, but also knowing what the Samaritan did was right, but also at the same time hating Samaritans. And so the expert, when Jesus says, which of these three do you think was the neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of the robbers? And the expert on the law replied, the one who had mercy on him. And Jesus told him, go and do likewise. Just like saying, love God with all your heart and love your neighbor as yourself, there's a call to action here. Go. Jesus replied, love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, and soul. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. Language is a cool thing, right? Sometimes the English language is a little on the lame side. We have like one word that describes a whole lot of things. And in the original text here, this word for love God and love others is similar to, we hear the word agape love a lot. Well, this is agapao love. It's pronounced slightly different. This is the verb version of love. So the people hearing this would have known that, oh, he said agapao, not agape. There is a difference. The people listening to this would have known, oh, he means this is like an active action verb type love. Not just, oh, I love her, she's so sweet, or I love tacos, or I love the Dallas Cowboys. Not that type of love. It's a... Excuse me. I love broken things, and I love the Dallas Cowboys. Like, what can I say? I love tacos, obviously. But so anyone listening would have known that this was not just a descriptive, feel-good, affectionate, I'm attracted to love. This was the purest form of love. Having the purest intentions for the person and putting those intentions into action. And so what Jesus is asking in the Greatest Command, he says to love others of ourselves with this. And he finished, all the law and all the prophets hang on these two things. And so Jesus is saying all the law and all the prophets is hanging on this action to love. This action to go and love actively, not passively, not passive-aggressively, but to actively love these things. All the law and prophets hang on these two things. They are connected together. This idea of loving others and putting others before ourselves is so woven into the gospel. Now, the command is not love God and go to church. The command is not love God and listen to podcasts. The command is not love God and retweet this for social justice. The command is not love God and say, I'm going to pray for you as you walk away. Now, I'm not saying those things are bad. I'm not saying retweeting something for social justice is a bad thing. I'm not saying praying for someone from a distance is a bad thing. We need to do those things. But the command is to love God and love others. It's an action. It's something that God is calling us to step into. Where we find ourselves in the story, are we just spectators? Are we extras? No. We are active participants in the story. We are active participants in the gospel. We are active participants in loving God by and through loving others. You know, I've shared the story of my mom when she was a little girl before. I'm not sure everybody in here has heard the story. I'll kind of give a brief version. But my mom grew up in a very, rough household. She grew up in a trailer park, small town in South Texas. And there was this pastor and his wife that came by and picked them up and took them to school, my mom and her brothers and sisters. You know, Mom lived in a pretty chaotic, abusive household. Her mother suffered from mental illness. And this pastor's wife would pick my mom and her brothers and maybe sister up and take them to church every Sunday. And then there was this Sunday school teacher, Miss Jeannie Holcomb. I had the chance to meet her later in life, actually. Would teach my mom and her brothers and sister every Sunday and pour into their lives. They took time out of their day, out of their schedule, to prioritize this little group of ragamuffin kids as they're rescuing them from a chaotic life. And they didn't do it, you know what, I kind of don't feel like it today, or I need to catch up on my soaps. Like, they did it as if my mom's very eternity depended on it. And moving forward in life, you know, that pastor later moved on, and my mom and her family, they moved to a different town and eventually to California and then back to Texas, and mom's life was super chaotic. And later in life, my mom is escaping that life, and she gets married. She finds my dad. And at some point, mom and dad, I'm on the way. Like, hello, what's up? Coming on. And mom says, I remember going to church as a little girl, and I remembered really liking it. I think I'd like that for our kids. And my dad, who was raised in a bar / dance hall / pool hall in a small town in South Texas, not exactly a wholesome life for a kid. My dad said, all right, whatever. I don't care. And so mom takes dad to church. I'm born years later. I'm growing up in church, and I'm a youth pastor, and I'm working here, and all that. And and I'm not trying to pat myself on the back, but when my years of youth ministry, I've got kids who came out of that who are now ministers, who are pastors and worship pastors and youth pastors and missionaries. Kids who are, I call them kids now, they're grown-ups. Grown-ups now who are business people living the gospel out. And I'm here today helping with all this amazing stuff the sanctuary does. And I may not be here helping with all this had someone not taken the time to invest in some kids' lives, had not taken the opportunity to actively live out the gospel and put a couple ragamuffin kids as their priority. There's this kingdom ripple effect that you'll never see by putting someone else ahead of yourself. And what does that mean? Well, that means maybe we give up one Sunday a month to help Joni downstairs in kids' church. Especially if you have kids. That means you give up one Sunday a month to come out here and help us in Ragamuffin. That means you give up a Saturday a month to help in food pantry. And there's only 2 of them. There's only 2 Saturdays a month we do food pantry. It means you give up time to pour into someone's life when they're going through a hard time, to take them out to coffee or to move some furniture. How many of you guys have been hiking and come across these like mountain streams that feed into a mountain lake? And they're beautiful and pristine, and the water is cold and clear, and you can see all the way to the bottom. You know, back home in South Texas, there's a lot of spots where we'd go wandering through fields, like trying to catch bullfrogs or picking dewberries and stuff like that. And you come across these ponds that you can't find them unless you're looking for them or you find them on accident. And they're gross. It's this pond. I'm not lying. It's a pond like the size of this room or half the size of this room. It's all overgrown on the sides. There's this like green mossy film across the top. The water's stagnant. It just sits there and rots. It's got frogs and mosquitoes. You know what the difference between that body of water is and the mountain stream? The mountain stream has water going in and out. This pond just has water coming in every now and then, and it sits there and does nothing. There's no outflow. There's nothing to keep it fresh. There's nothing to rejuvenate it or renew it, to bring in fresh water. We're the same way, folks. We're called to, they would say back home, we're called to be partakers, not pew takers. When we're living out the gospel, when the gospel of Jesus Christ is woven into everything we do, we cannot help but put others before ourselves. Listen, and I mean this very seriously, you cannot be a mature Christian and sit on your butt every Sunday. You cannot be a mature Christian and sit on your butt every Sunday. You know, Tyler was talking about how awesome it is that our church is 80-20. 80% of our effort goes into 80% of our week, and 20% of our effort goes into 20% of our week. What if we had 80% of our people doing 80% of their work? I'm nobody's friend today. I'm not the funny guy anymore. The worship team is going to come back up, and they're going to play something for us, and we're going to enter in. I want to challenge you guys, though. God is calling us as Christ followers to step into the gospel, to actively love people, to put action behind our words. In James, where is it? I have to look it up. In James chapter 2, verse 14, it says, "What good is it, my brothers and sisters, if someone claims to have faith but have no deeds? Can such faith save them? Suppose a brother or sister is without clothes and daily food. If one of you says to them, 'Go in peace, keep warm and well fed,' but does nothing about their physical needs, what good is it? In the same way, faith by itself, if not accompanied by action, is dead. But someone will say, 'You have faith, I have deeds. Show me your faith without deeds, and I will show you my faith by my deeds.' You believe there is one God? Good. Even the demons believe that and shudder. Do you want evidence that faith without deeds is useless? Was not our father Abraham considered righteous for what he did when he offered his son Isaac on the altar? You see that his faith and his actions were working together. And his faith was made complete by what he did. And the scripture was fulfilled that says Abraham believed God and was credited to him as righteousness, and he was called God's friend." A person is considered righteous by what they do, not by faith alone. Jesus was making it very clear that loving God is not complete without loving other people, without putting action to it. You know, we have a saying around here, calling over comfort. It's really comfortable to come sit in here on a Sunday and experience probably some of the best worship in the church I've ever experienced, to go over here and get some good food and ragamuffin, to hang out, listen to awesome jokes. That's all very comfortable. But we're not being called to a life of comfort. We're being called to a life of action. We're being called to weave the gospel into every fabric of our being, to every day live as though God is walking with us, as Jesus is walking with us. If you look at Jesus' life, the way he talked, the way he taught, the way he lived, his actions, what he did, everything he did, this gospel of the kingdom, this living life on purpose, this action of putting others before yourself, he was constantly going to the outcast, to the people that the religious establishment told him not to Samaritans, to lepers, to women the woman who was caught in adultery, people that he should have been avoiding, he was seeking out. He was targeting. And people hated him for it. The religious establishment hated him for it. So if we're going to be Christ followers, Christ-like, if we're going to be Christians, a big part of that is stepping out and putting action to that faith, putting the action version of love. Is that a WWJD? Sweet. I'm going to wear this. So stand with me if you don't mind. I'm wrapping up. Everybody says, oh, thank goodness, the funny guy's not funny today. So as the worship team's playing, I want you guys to take this opportunity to really try to enter into the presence of God. Listen to his voice. Ask him, what do I do now? Ask him where those opportunities are. And for everybody, that's different. Not everybody has what it takes to work with kids downstairs. Like, kids they can be scary. But you know what? If you're called to it and you're gifted, it'll be the most fulfilling thing you've ever done in your life, I guarantee. There'll be this like burning passion in your heart, and you'll see these kids' eyes light up when they hear the gospel, when they hear about Jesus who loves them no matter what they do, when they live in a house whose parents are telling them they're stupid, when they go to kids and when they go to school and other kids are telling them they're ugly and smelly and worthless, and they're hearing about this guy Jesus who says they're awesome, and this Jesus guy says he loves them. Dude, seeing a kid's face light up when they hear that, there's nothing like that, man. Coming out here, working in Ragamuffin, talking to our friends week in and week out, and just being normal with them. You know, we say a lot around here that Jesus didn't minister to the poor, he was a friend of the poor. You know, we do things like Super Bowl party for our homeless friends. We try to hang out with them. It's not just a handout. It's hey, come along. Let me know they're real people, right? So I want you guys to pray and listen to the voice of God. See where God is leading you, because I promise you, God is not telling you, hey, just sit there and do nothing the rest of your life. God is calling you to action. So they're going to play, and that's my challenge to you guys, and that's your homework. This week, you are going to find where God is calling you to love others as yourself, the action version of love.
Thanks for tuning in to a message from the Sanctuary Church. For more information and media, go to our website at thesanctuarywestside.org or follow us on Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube.